It's a new dawn and it's a new era for Formula One. We have got a fresh, brand new set of technical regulations which is going to completely change not only the look of the cars, but also how they race each other on track and also the grid order itself. But who's managed to get the best out of their car and who's managed to get the worst out of their car in this new era of Formula One? Well, welcome everybody to the F1 Journey Season 10 pre-season, which takes place here at Silverstone for the first time in the F1 Journey universe. But I've given my intro, I've done my piece, let's go straight into it and have a look at the teams and the drivers for their respective cars in the F1 Journey Season 10. It's time to get a new season underway and let's have a look at the first team that came out, and it was Porsche. They arrived here with a new deal with Vodafone, as their deal initially expired at the end of last year, but that has been extended. Now, it's a little bit of a surprise to see this, as Vodafone have typically been a sponsor that wants their team right at the front of the field. So why go ahead and make a new deal with the team that finished last in the Constructors' Championship last year? Well, it looks like they knew what was going on behind the scenes. Porsche have actually managed to, what appears to have, looked to have done a very good job with the regulation change. Now, Porsche have stated that they put all of their effort into this new regulation change. Of course, when they rolled out for pre-season and finished the first two races of last season, they realised that they were going to be right at the back of the field. There was no point in even bothering trying to heavily develop the car to try and catch up when there was a new set of regulations on the way. So what did they do? They put all of their time, all of their money and their resources into this new era of Formula One cars, and it looks to have paid off. They've made a massive step forward, and from what the rest of the paddock is saying, they might have just found that early silver bullet. One person that definitely fancied a look at the Porsche team was two-time champion Reese. Shockingly enough, Porsche managed to actually sign him for this season, replacing Valtteri Bottas. Carlos Sainz decided to stick with the Porsche team for yet another season. So it is going to be very interesting to see now, can Porsche do something with the two-time champion Reese alongside them? They've got Carlos Sainz, who's an incredible driver as well, to partner him, and have these major steps that Porsche have done going to put them right at the top of the field. Aston Martin were the team that managed to just overhaul Porsche at the very bottom of the championship. But it doesn't seem like Aston Martin have quite been able to do what Porsche have done so far in pre-season testing, and that is making that major step forward. And obviously the biggest problem with that is that Aston Martin did commit themselves to development last season, whereas Porsche decided against doing any form of development whatsoever. The Aston Martin Aramco Formula One team has had a little bit of a colour scheme rework, with plenty more of the famous yellow being put onto the already nice green livery. And they've decided for this season to go overseas to go and find a new driver, as Aston Martin have secured Colton Herta from IndyCar. It has been a long time coming, plenty of speculations, plenty of rumours about Herta making the jump to Formula One, and Aston Martin have been the team to offer him that opportunity. Theo Pourchaire remains at the team for yet another season, and as things stand, he will be the effective team leader. So how did Aston Martin get on in pre-season testing then? Well, unfortunately for Aston Martin, it wasn't quite an amazing pre-season testing. The only form of upside that Aston Martin can take from this pre-season testing is that they were able to get plenty of mileage on the car. So that's something that they can use now to make sure that they help develop their car for the remainder of the season. Where it doesn't quite work out for Aston Martin is throughout the entirety of the test here at Silverstone, they really struggled to get the car dialed up and working in the right window. There was always something that just wasn't right with the car, whether it was the ride height being a bit too high, whether the suspension was a bit too stiff at the front, whether there was understeer, oversteer. Every single time they made a set of changes, there was always a new element of the car that just wasn't working quite right. Now, of course, all these teams have to get used to these new cars and how they're set up, but it was something that Aston Martin just really struggled with, and they've openly admitted that, and this may put them on the back foot for the start of the season. BMW have returned to Formula One. We knew from last season that Ford were very much considering ending their time in Formula One, and that is what they have done, and it has paved the way for BMW to try and build a redemption story back in Formula One. the last time we saw BMW in Formula 1 was with a partnership with Red Bull Racing, in which we had BMW Red Bull Racing. That partnership unfortunately fell apart very quickly, with BMW producing a very poor engine which left the Red Bull team fighting at the back of the field, and it caused a very big row, and eventually BMW ended up leaving Formula 1. But they did say, when they were no longer power suppliers with Red Bull, that they would come back. And now they have taken that opportunity and have gone ahead and taken over the Ford team. Another massive shock, though, that has come out of all of this is former F1 driver Mason Wood has returned to Formula 1 and he has signed with BMW. Now remember, Mason Wood was driving for Red Bull when he was partnered with the BMW powertrain in the back of the Red Bull. Of course, due to the entire scandal in which Red Bull literally stole pieces of information regarding Ford's power unit to make their car better, of course, Mason Woods was found not fully guilty for being the man in the act. That was all down to Noah James. However, Mason Woods was given a ban from motorsports due to the fact of him taking part in the event nonetheless. However, during this off period, we have now found out that Mason Woods actually signed a deal to be a part of the BMW Motorsports Academy. Now, of course, this was very, very important because during the behind the scenes, BMW stated to Mason Woods that they are looking to try and get themselves back into Formula 1. They've had discussions with Formula 1 and we want you to be the man to come back into Formula 1 and showcase to everybody why you were the driver that everyone was so hyped about before obviously you signed for Red Bull. And now, here is the opportunity for not only BMW to get their redemption arc, but Mason Wood to join them in doing just that. Now, who's driving alongside Mason Wood in the BMW team? Well, Nick de Vries has made the swap from Mercedes to BMW. And that is a very interesting call, meaning that as things currently stand, we are looking at a new driver going to Mercedes. Now, in terms of the entire pre-season test though, how did BMW get on? Well, they actually got on quite well. They had a very good pre-season test. They got plenty of mileage under the car. One issue on day 2 of testing where they had an issue with the gearbox, so they lost some time with that. However, apart from that, they got a very solid running and the car was working well. They genuinely believe that unless people are hiding a lot of performance, they could find themselves not necessarily fighting at the front of the field, but definitely putting themselves into contention to getting quite a few point scoring finishes. Audi were the next team to hit the track here at Silverstone, and a very surprising transfer actually. Valtteri Bottas has made the move to join Audi for this season. A very interesting switch for Valtteri Bottas. Of course, we remember last season, Bottas was battling at the back of the field with the Porsche team and had been there for a few seasons. Unfortunately, it didn't work out. But of course, things change in Formula 1, and as we saw from the earlier segment in pre-season testing, Porsche were very much having a great time. So how did Audi get on? Well, first things first, to the surprise of many, Charles Leclerc has also opted to stay with Audi for yet another season. The rumour going around in the paddock was that Charles Leclerc had become frustrated with the backwards performance that Audi were putting together. 2 seasons in a row, Charles Leclerc was very much in championship contention and just missed out on claiming the Formula 1 World Drivers' Championship. Last season, in the final season of the old era of Formula 1, Charles Leclerc and the Audi team took a massive step backwards and ended up finishing not only behind Jaguar, but Mercedes, who had seen that they'd been beating consistently before, also managed to get in front of them. And they were only quicker than Ford, Aston Martin and Porsche based off the Constructors' Championship. But Charles Leclerc's loyalty to the team remains, and he's going to stay there for another season, but Audi really need to get it right. And in pre-season testing, it doesn't quite look like they actually have, as a lot of the speculation going around within the garage is that the team is not performing as well as they genuinely expected. Of course, Audi did put quite a bit of resources into last season to try and build upon a backward step with their car, but they were unable to do that. However, their fierce battle with Jaguar meant that they did everything they could to try and get as much prize money from the last season as possible. It clearly was not the right way to go, as the development on their new car hasn't quite paid off. However, there is still a long way to go, and we've only just begun the new era of Formula 1, so there is an opportunity for them to try and get it right. But as things stand, Audi don't quite think they're there just yet. Next up is the team that just managed to beat Audi last season, and it is Jaguar. And first things first, Jaguar have made the switch back to a green livery. Of course, for the past few seasons, or for quite some time now actually, Jaguar have been sporting a turquoise blue on black livery. This time around, they've gone to a light green and black livery, and it very much looks like a very nice car. And they've gone with an all-British lineup. They've gone with George Russell and Callum Ilott have joined the team for this season, and they're looking to try and bring Jaguar back to the front where they had been many seasons ago. So what's been going on then at Jaguar, and how have they been getting along? Well, Jaguar overall have been fairly satisfied with their car. However, they have now noticed a problem with their design in pre-season testing, which they say is a big problem for now, but it's not something that can be completely rectified in the near future. So, what's going on with their car then? Well, they found out that there's a lot of issues, especially at the rear end of their car. Now, the first thing that obviously they noticed was the car was very oversteery. So on a track like Silverstone, where we had this pre-season testing, it really wasn't helping them, especially through the likes of Copse, Maggotts, Beckett, Stowe, etc. The car was just not there with them on the rear end, and that was really making the drivers lose a lot of confidence. And the key thing that the drivers need in a car is confidence on the rear end, unless you're somebody that likes a rear end that's extremely snappy. However, this rear end is just a tiny bit too snappy. But it's not just that though. Jaguar still believe there's a lot of elements around the rear that are not quite right yet, such as the diffuser, the rear end of the floor, the suspension. Everything around the rear they seem to have just not got quite right. In terms of the front end of the car, they have very much nailed that to a T. Now during pre-season testing, in order to try and balance out the rear end, they've obviously had to do a lot of sacrifices to the front end of the car to try and bring a bit more stability and balance to the rear of the car. They have actually finally, on the final day of testing, found a way to get a better balance so that the car is not too oversteery. The problem with that is that the way that their front end is working is not allowing them to get that same performance in there. So now they're suffering with a little bit of understeer through these corners, and there's no way to counteract that. So they've got a better balance on their car, but unfortunately for them, it's actually making the car slower. At this moment in time, Jaguar have accepted that if they are to be anywhere near the front or getting points, for example, they're going to have to let their drivers, unfortunately, deal with a very oversteery car, as despite the fact that it is snappy on the rear end, it is the fastest way for them to get around the circuit as things currently stand. It's safe to say, for many seasons now, Mercedes-Benz have been a team that has just gone backwards and have found it so difficult to get back to the front again. Well, this could be the season where finally that changes, and Mercedes-Benz have gone all out and changed their driver lineup and have managed to get two former Mercedes elite giants back into their team. Lewis Hamilton and Tom have both rejoined Mercedes-Benz for this season, and Toto Wolff has stated that he has finally got the drivers he always wanted back into his team. But the biggest question that's going around in the paddock is this driver pairing going to work? Now, Tom has stated on many occasions that he's always wanted to partner Lewis Hamilton, as so far he's not been able to do that. But of course, through the past 2 seasons now, Tom and Hamilton have been engrossed in a championship battle between themselves when they were at Renault and Ferrari respectively. The biggest question is, when you've got two drivers that were technically classed as the #1 drivers in their teams going together in a car which, as things currently stand, looks incredibly competitive, will it really work out? Well, only time's going to tell on that one. So how do Mercedes get on then? A team that really needs to find a way back to the front of the field. They might have just done that with this new car. A very interesting zero-pod concept that seems to be working absolutely beautifully for them. Now, Mercedes are refusing to confirm and believe that they are the team to beat. Despite setting the fastest time of pre-season testing, they have confirmed pre-season means absolutely nothing, and it's just about getting an understanding of what their car is and where it can go with them. Both Tom and Hamilton both confirmed that they were very happy with the car. They were happy with the balance, they were happy with the different setup changes, they felt the car was working well, and they were really pleased with it. But again, both of them confirming that Mercedes have been struggling for many seasons now, and they cannot get ahead of themselves, and they need to wait until the season begins to truly find out whether they've actually built a car worthy enough of competing for a Drivers' and Constructors' Championship. But is this the season when Mercedes will finally find themselves back at the front of the field, or will it be yet another season of qualifying promise followed by Sunday race pace performance, dropping them further down the order? A team that's had a habit of fighting at the front for many seasons is McLaren, and they are back again for a new season and a little bit of a reshuffle within the team. First things first, the one thing that has stayed the same is one of the drivers. Pato O'Ward, that joined the team last season to go alongside Rees, has retained his seat for yet another season. McLaren said that despite the fact that Pato O'Ward was a lot further behind than anticipated, they felt like his development needed time, and it was something that they were willing to give. And this time around though, with the loss of Rees, who has gone ahead and joined Porsche, Sam has decided to re-sign for the team in which he made his debut with. And if you're somebody that's followed McLaren, or indeed followed the F1 journey for quite some time, you'll remember the black and orange livery that McLaren ran all those seasons ago. Now they are back with that specific livery once again, as they have decided to part ways with Gulf and have set up McLaren Shadow Racing. And as you can see, it looks absolutely beautiful. Now normally the tradition is, if a car looks very, very good in terms of the livery and the aesthetics, surely it means it is a fast car. So is that the case? Well, yes and no. Now, the car itself is in a very, very good position. On the short runs and the long runs that we saw in pre-season testing, the McLaren looked very nicely balanced. Going through all the corners, specifically through the likes of Copson, Maggotts and Beckett's, it was quite clear that compared to a lot of the other cars on the field, the McLaren looked very nicely well planted. And it looked like the drivers were able to commit to going through the corners at the speed and the determination that they wanted. But McLaren still believe that there is just a few tenths shy. Does this remind you of something? Yeah, this reminds you very much of last season. Last season, McLaren felt that they had a very good car, but they still needed a few tenths to fight at the front. Well, McLaren believe that that is the same thing again this season. They feel like that they definitely have a car which could potentially fight for the occasional podiums here and there, but they believe that if they're going to challenge and take on multiple race victories, they just need a couple more updates to do that. Specifically, they were targeting trying to get a lighter chassis. At the moment, McLaren have confirmed that their chassis is slightly overweight, and they want to try and reduce a little bit of the drag, as they feel at the moment, with this heavy chassis and the way that it has actually been built, they could also do with a little bit of drag reduction, and by getting a lighter chassis, not only will it be faster through the corners, but if you can make a few tiny little tweaks, you may be able to make that car a tiny little bit less draggy. But they still feel they're very much in with an opportunity of doing some damage this season. The rumour mill in Formula 1 is that we would be seeing two brand new teams enter Formula 1 for this new generation of the sport. And we've seen the first one. That was BMW taking over from Ford. Now, we were expecting to see a new team take over from Renault, because they were the team that were very much at the heart of the fuel crisis last season, which of course pretty much confirmed that Renault were going to be leaving the sport. Of course, last season we had a major fuel crisis, and a lot of the issues were very much being heavily targeted at motorsports for basically using fuel consistently and unnecessarily and causing all of the crisis. Of course, with all that being averted now, one manufacturer that really put their money where their mouth is was Renault. They said that they were going to leave the sport. They couldn't handle all of the toxicity and the damage that the brand was taking from the fuel crisis saga involving Formula 1. And that, of course, meant that many of the staff members decided to leave. Tom's race engineer eventually left, and, well, he went to Mercedes-Benz. Guess who else went to Mercedes-Benz? Tom also went to Mercedes-Benz, and it just seemed like Renault were done and dusted. Well, no, they're not. They're staying. Renault remain in Formula 1 despite all of the speculation that they were going to leave. And, well, they're very interesting, but yeah, they're here to stay. Daniel Ricciardo has decided to sign for Renault this season, and he is joined alongside Pierre Gasly, whose loyalty to the team still remains to this day. So, in pre-season testing, well, it's not gone according to plan for Renault. Obviously, what we would like to have seen from Renault was make that step up to going for the Constructors' Championship. Of course, last season, Renault managed to give Tom a car good enough to win the Drivers' Championship, but they couldn't get the Constructors' Championship. But unfortunately for Renault, they've fallen into the exact same problem that they did the last time that they said that they'd had enough with Formula 1. And that is that the development for this season started late because no one knew that they were going to be actually a part of Formula 1. All these mechanics, all these aerodynamicists, all these, powertrain team members, no one knew that they were going to be developing and continuing in the sport. So how could they build something that they didn't know that they were going to be even able to use? And it's happened again, and Renault have slipped back in pre-season testing because they were late to development. I mean, their car looks absolutely stunning, but it just, in terms of the livery anyway, but in terms of the performance, it's not there on the track. And whereas Renault should have been fighting for championships this year, they'll need to be fighting just to get plenty of points on the board. The next team to take a look at is the lovely Scarlet Red Scuderia Ferrari that is back on track here at Silverstone. And they have started things off by doing the exact same thing as what Porsche have done, and that is extend their deal with Emirates for this season. Of course, Ferrari has started a new sponsorship deal with Emirates, and they've decided to continue that heading into this season. So that's the only thing actually with the Ferrari that has actually stayed the same, is their title sponsor, and of course the fact that they're in the Scarlet Red. They have gone with a all new driver lineup for this season. Lando Norris has decided to leave Jaguar, and he has gone and joined Ferrari, with Oscar Piastri, who is driving for Aston Martin, making the switch to the Scuderia Ferrari team. So where has this come from? Well, last season, Ferrari had the driver lineup of Lewis Hamilton and Mick Schumacher in their arsenal. But it was a driver lineup that technically worked, as they had Lewis Hamilton, who was the man that was going for the championships, and Mick Schumacher was there to try and gain the experience. Ferrari, however, was very unhappy with Mick Schumacher and his performances, and of course with Lewis Hamilton deciding to leave the team and jump ship back to Mercedes, Ferrari did not want to keep Mick Schumacher, meaning they needed to get an all-new lineup. So they went ahead and did a little bit of negotiating. Lando Norris stated that he was extremely unhappy with Jaguar. The performances just weren't there at the team. Lando Norris joined Jaguar hoping to try and do some special things with the team, and it's just not worked out. Jaguar have just continuously been slipping backwards, and Norris felt enough was enough and he needed to move elsewhere. When the call came through from Ferrari to try and snatch up Lando Norris, Norris said that it was an opportunity that he simply could not refuse. Going to the Scuderia was an absolute dream of his. As for Oscar Piastri, Ferrari had been monitoring for quite some time, but when Oscar went to Aston Martin, Ferrari were very frustrated, as of course the natural shift up then would have been to go to Mercedes, as Aston Martin and Mercedes have been having a little bit of a driver program theme going on. But that has since very much subsided, and it's Aston Martin very much being independent to themselves. So when Aston Martin decided to switch up their driver lineup and bring in Colton Herta from IndyCar, Oscar Piastri decided to look elsewhere, as he didn't have the trust in the team that they would be able to move up the field. And Ferrari finally found the opportunity to get the man that they wanted in for quite some time. And that's exactly what they have done. And in pre-season testing, it seems like they have done what they wanted, not fall backwards. Ferrari were one of the three teams that were always in the fight for the championship last season, albeit four actually, because of course McLaren were there as well. And it was an opportunity for those top four teams to slip down the order. But Ferrari don't seem to have done that. They seem to have kept a lot of performance. It was a very worrying winter for the Scuderia. They genuinely felt concerned that everything that they did to go for the championship, which they just missed out on in the final two races of last season, was going to result in another new season of Formula 1 in a brand new era where they were going to be far behind. But it doesn't look like that's the case, and they're very pleased with that, as their winter was a rather worrying one for the Scuderia. Throughout the course of last season, there was many rumours and many different stories going around that Petronas were returning to Formula 1. And they even admitted it themselves, they were coming back to Formula 1. So instantly, you would automatically think of that dream partnership that has been for so long of Mercedes, AMG, Petronas, Formula 1 team. That's what we were all expecting. Well, nope. In a complete shock to everyone, Petronas has moved to partner Red Bull for this season to bring us Petronas Red Bull Racing. And that's a massive shock because even though Mercedes were the strong favourites, even the likes of BMW would potentially have been a shout. But nope, Petronas have signed a deal to help and partner alongside Red Bull for this season. And Red Bull have brought back Stoffel van Dorn and also Sergio Perez to create their lineup at the team in a very, very interesting move from the reigning Constructors' Champions. But how have the team that won the championship last season got along so far in pre-season testing? Well, unfortunately, unlike Ferrari, Red Bull don't believe that they've got everything quite right with their car. They've very much been struggling to get it working the way that they want, and they do believe that they are on the back foot heading into this season. Red Bull do believe that with plenty of upgrades in the pipeline, they can try and move themselves forwards, but they do admit it is going to be very, very difficult to potentially be fighting for podiums and race wins early on in the season. And this is something that, of course, was the biggest fear, especially with the top 4 teams. They were fighting so hard for the championship last season that with this new regulation change, it would mix things up a bit. And unfortunately for Red Bull, they have been the team that has suffered with the regulation change. At the moment, as things stand, of course, we only got through pre-season testing, it's not worked out in their favour. The last thing for us to take a look at is going to be the race calendar for this season, and the FIA has released a 16 race calendar for this new season of Formula 1. The FIA have announced that we're going to be racing in Miami for the very first time. That'll be the official US Grand Prix. Of course, we've been racing at COTA for many seasons, and there was very much a big rumour going around as to whether we would actually see 2 races in the US. However, it's been confirmed there will just be the 1 race in the US titled the official US Grand Prix, taking place in Miami. There's been modifications as well to the track layouts at Australia and also Abu Dhabi, and they both feature on the calendar. So let's go and have a look at the calendar itself then. So the first round of the season takes place at the Australian Grand Prix, with the Formula 1 field moving over to Japan for round number 2. The Asian leg concludes itself with a race at Singapore for the 3rd round, with Bahrain coming up next as round number 4. The final 2 rounds then are the Saudi Arabian Grand Prix being round number 5 and round number 6 being Abu Dhabi for the Middle Eastern leg. We then head over to the European leg of the calendar, with the Dutch Grand Prix being round number 7. The British Grand Prix is the 8th round of the season, followed by the Emilia-Romagna Grand Prix at Imola. Then we've got round number 10 at Austria, followed by the Italian Grand Prix, which is round number 11. The Portuguese Grand Prix takes us to the 12th round of the season, followed up by the Belgium Grand Prix. And then we go over to the American leg, where we've got the Canadian Grand Prix coming in at round number 14, the US Grand Prix taking place at Miami, that was round number 15, and then the Brazilian Grand Prix is the 16th round of the season. But there it is, guys. That is everything for pre-season. You now know the drivers, the teams, the liveries, and the cars. But now we just need to get straight into the racing. And next time you see me, you will see a Grand Prix for the F1 Journey Season 10. I'm out. Peace.